Greetings, fellow investors. I'm Matthew Cochrane, a lead advisor at Seven Investing, where it is our mission to empower you to invest in your future. We do that by providing monthly stock recommendations to our premium members and educational content that is freely available to everyone. Listeners, today I am very excited to introduce Eric Clark, a brand strategist and an investor in leading global brands. He can be found on his website, globalbrandsmatter.com, and on Twitter, where I find his takes both entertaining and thoughtful. On today's show, we're going to explore Eric's strategy for investing in consumer brands, how he ranks brands, and why he limits his portfolio to just this one area. I've followed Eric for a long time, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. So let's get to it. Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
I'm doing great, Eric. So let's just start there. Why consumer brands? Why limit your portfolio and the entire business universe? Why limit your portfolio to just this one area?
It's a couple of reasons, really. Number one, very few other people do it. You said you follow me on Twitter. I tend to be somewhat contrarian a lot of the time. My wife would probably corroborate that. But
Sure.
I've worked in this industry for like 26 years, and I work for some big institutional money managers, and I noticed a couple of things. One, there was, every fund, every ETF always has some exposure to consumer stocks, and but very few of them are dedicated to that thematic. And it's kind of ironic. I mean, 70% of GDP here is consumer spending, 60% of world GDP is consumer spending. So, it's very odd that there's very little places to go to get real dedication to the consumer theme, given that it's like 40 trillion a year. That seemed to be a bit of a disconnect. And for some reason, nobody, I mean, literally, we're the only game in town as far as investing and kind of dedicating to identifying the brands, the best brands, the most relevant brands. And, Interbrands and Brand Z and all those brand consulting firms that are huge advertising and PR firms, they've been pounding the table on, brands matter and these are great businesses. And if you really work on enhancing your brand, you're probably going to gather more customers, have more loyalty, et cetera, which, they kind of stop there. And then I take it one step further in trying to help people connect the dots between all of those good financial metrics and brand loyalty to actually it being a good stock. And part of that is because the first book I ever read in the industry was Peter Lynch's One Up on Wall Street. And that book, his writing just instantly resonated with me. And then when you look at the track record of Magellan, when he ran that, it was the number one fund. And, as a young guy, I was just, kind of impressionable, and it just kind of resonated with me. So for my own personal investing, there was a lot of focus on the consumer and, which companies that I really loved and enjoyed spending time on, or whether it was an apparel company like Nike, or, if I was waiting in line at Chipotle, et cetera. So, it was this little time in my career where I just said, I can keep doing what I'm doing, but I have an itch. I really want to create something that doesn't exist. And so I looked at active management in general, and I tried to identify, what's really good about active, what's really bad about active, and let's try to enhance it. And let's dedicate to some theme that's always present, really predictable and really stable. And that's kind of the product of that exercise, in 2015.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up Peter Lynch, because I'll take a backseat to no one when it comes to being like a fan of Peter Lynch and his books. There's some of the first books I read too when I got into investing, and there's such a great jumping off place to get started investing. And there is a certain like Peter Lynchian like appeal for this type of investing, right? Because you're talking about consumer brands, and that's something that everybody's at least partly familiar with. We all have our products that we enjoy and use every day.
100%. I mean, when I'm talking to a financial advisor, about the fund, I always start with like, I can guarantee you this is going to be the easiest conversation you have with a client or prospect, because we're all consumers. We all understand spending money is part of our DNA as Americans, and it's kind of a global phenomenon. And we all have this loyalty to certain brands in different spending categories, whether it's, warehouse shopping at Costco, or, my daughter literally at the beginning of this process, she said, Dad, if you don't have Target in your portfolio, I will not speak
Sure.
to you. Right.
Right, right,
Right. The
right.
kids are, she's 11. She is so brand aware at her age. And I don't know that we were as brand aware when we were kids. It certainly, it wasn't as prevalent as I think it is now. But yeah, I mean, everybody kind of understands the concept of consumption, and we all have favorites. But if you can analyze, the universe and kind of see who rises to the top, those are usually pretty good places to at least start from a research perspective.
Yeah, and that's so true. And we were talking before the show about our kids a little bit, and like, starting early. I mean, like you said, your 11-year-old daughter. I mean, they know what they like. They know like what brands they like as far as clothes go, or shoes, or like so many other things. Even like video games, like Xbox versus PlayStation, and things like that. That's
Trends start with the youth, right?
right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I'll say when I invest, the main thing I look for, the primary thing I look for is companies with economic moats. And I fully acknowledge that brands can represent a moat. But I'll also say, like, when I find a company and I feel like that its brand is its primary moat, I almost get a little nervous. Like, is this a soft economic moat? It's almost like a little squishy. Like other types of moats feel a little more concrete, like high switching cost or network effects. Like, am I wrong? Like, how strong of an economic moats can brands be?
Well, they can be unbelievably strong with the footnote that consumers can be fickle. I'm sure you follow Jeff Mackey on Twitter as well. He,
Of
he
course.
actually
Yep.
lives in San
Yep.
Diego, and him and I have commiserated over the years about retail, because I consider him a retail expert. I mean, his dad grew up in Target, and it's just funny to see certain moats. Sears had a moat at one time. J.C. Penney had a moat at
Sure.
one time.
Sure.
But what I find is that it's so easy for some of these legacy brands to just get lazy, and you can't get lazy anymore. So, assuming a company really does continue to have a visionary management team and is willing to self disrupt sometimes, and is kind of ahead of the curve, or like, Steve Jobs used to say, we're not just here to create what customers tell us they want. Sometimes customers need to be shown what they want. But the moat in some way can only be maintained if the company is committed to innovating, and keeping that customer delight and all that kind of stuff. And that's hard. So not everybody can do it and do it well. And sometimes you fall off for a little while, like Chipotle had their issues with the food scare. And but man, the consumer really, is willing to give you the benefit of the doubt if they believe in your business, and in your philosophy and your mission. And certainly if you can prove that you're staying true to that mission. All of those things, I think, are moats. They're certainly intangible. I mean, we put the brand in the intangible assets
Sure.
category.
Of course. Yep.
And maybe that's why there aren't a lot of brand dedicated strategies, because the brand is so intangible. Traditional analysts operate on the balance sheet and on the income statement, and brands, for the most part, don't really fall there. It's a very subjective thing. It's a very intangible thing. Jeff Bezos used to say, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Right.
That's not
Right.
something that you can put in the balance sheet. And so some people aren't very good at analyzing the strength of the brand. And sometimes I get into that on Twitter with somebody about a company that they say, hey, the financials don't look this way. And I might say, you can't ignore the strength of the brand in the mind of the consumer, because that sometimes pushes you through to the other side, when financial metrics will follow along, where the brand loyalty started the whole process.
Sure. Sure. So you talked about Sears and J.C. Penney's and how they used to have modes. So this is something I'm curious about. How do you rank brands? Because you can't just be like if you just asked me, for instance, like, do you like Macy's? And what I would think of, like, when I think of Macy's, I think of the Macy's Day Parade, which is like it harkens images in my mind of like Thanksgiving and just good times. So I would say, yeah, I think I like Macy's. I have no idea when the last time is that I stepped in a Macy's or bought something from them, but I would say I like Macy's. So how do you rank brands, I guess? Because how do you separate like people's like consumers like memories of these like iconic brands, but companies, brands of like companies that are dying? Like how do you sift through all that and how do you rank them?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's a very detailed process. So in the beginning of this process, we said, okay, if you're gonna anchor to a theme, you probably need an investment universe to start. And so that's where we created the brands index. And that's, my investable universe is 200 companies that we update every December. So it's almost like that Nifty 50. The Nifty 50 back in the day had one flaw. They never updated it. It was the
Sure.
same companies and
Okay.
they lost relevancy and they just kept them. And so people made fun of the Nifty 50. We focus on the relevancy part of that equation. In
And
the
so
beginning.
hence the dynamic brands, I guess.
Absolutely,
All
absolutely.
right.
And we started off with the phrase iconic brand. It's got some sexy marketing. And the reality is the definition of iconic is just recognizable. Like you said, Sears and Macy's is recognizable. I wouldn't say that they're particularly relevant anymore.
Right. Of course.
Certainly
Of
not
course.
not like they used to be. So once we created the 200 index, and that is a very kind of a detailed process because they're intangible assets. Essentially what we did is we said, let's go find brands where they live in the indexes and at the sub industry level, just to create the 200. And so what we did is there's about 150 sub industries in the S&P 1500, I think it is. And we literally went through each one of those and looked at the holdings, looked at the kind of the name of the sub industry, and kind of gave it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Is that industry either A, directly tied to the consumer, most of the companies that are in that sub industry, or are those businesses kind of consumption supply chain companies, meaning they produce a product that's vital to a consumer direct, a B2C company.
Okay. Okay.
And so from there, we just created a ranking system that's very quantitative, total market cap, revenues, revenue growth, a bunch of other financial metrics. All that did was allow us to rank a company from kind of best, most relevant, if you will, down to least relevant. And obviously market cap tends to be a part of that because if you become really relevant, it means that you're probably a bigger company in most industries.
Sure.
So that's one part of the process, and there's a much more detailed explanation of the 200. But to answer your question directly on the brand relevancy, so the first step was to create that universe of 200. The next step from the stock selection perspective was I built what was called a brand relevancy scoring system. And I sat down and I said, okay, if I'm going to try to laser in on companies that are really doing well and therefore resonating, let's take it from a quantitative approach and a qualitative approach. And so I built this screen that 50% of it is the traditional financial metrics, like I said, the revenue growth, the free cash flow, the ROICs, all of those great measures that kind of tell you who's getting it done on the operating side. And then the other part was, which is frankly the more time consuming part, the quantitative stuff in general gets done through a screener that we created and through use of Y charts. I know you use Y charts too. It's been terrific.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Yes.
those guys are great. But the subjective part of this is detailed. It's an assessment of a business on factors like, can we prove that they have a management team that has a lot of vision, that's shown that they have vision? Can we prove that they're pretty strong capital allocators in looking at back quarterly earnings and all the other quarterly reports? Do we see a culture of innovation in there? Do they seem to be ESG friendly? I mean, that's I'm a little bit, ESG in general tends to be a little marketing oriented. But at the end of the day, if you have a management team that thinks about their employees and how they treat people and how they view the world and their carbon footprint and all those kinds of things, those are probably pretty thoughtful people, and you can imply that they're probably running a business the right way. So there's a lot of those subjective factors combined with the quantitative factors that all roll up into a score. And naturally you might assume a lot of the biggest brands, the Apples and the Googles and the Microsofts and Amazon, those obviously would rise to the top for a variety of reasons. But you always find these great nuggets of opportunity, and those are the ones that I get most excited. So every quarter when I kind of go through this process after earnings season, I get so pumped to see who's going to start to rise to the top. And it's brought up names like a Medifast, which is on the meal replacement side, and Domino's when it was out of favor. And it's actually been a pretty good, interesting source of stock selection and idea generation, because you sometimes you're not focused on a particular part of consumer spending, and then that shows up. You have a couple of names that show up on the screen, which kind of makes you focus and say, okay, this is interesting. What's happening here between the subjective and the quantitative that's saying, hey, this brand is really relevant and their financial metrics are accelerating and doing really well. And now I'm going to go look at some technical charts to see if it's an interesting, kind of potential buying opportunity. So long story short, there's a lot of detail oriented, analysis that goes into this thing. And then part of it is just, you and I, we're all consumers.
Sure.
Like Peter Lynch, when I'm out, in public, looking at stores and seeing where the crowds are developing, you see the crowds at the Apple store, you see them at the Lulu store, you don't see anybody at Urban Outfitters or wherever. You talk to your wife, who's, let's face it, women control 85% of the household checkbook. So between kids and their trends and women and their knowledge of trends and all the work that we do, you get a lot of great data that gives you some idea from, where to do some more stock selection work.
That's really interesting. So you mentioned Domino's. So let me ask you a question. So like 10 years ago, and I don't think you were doing this exact strategy 10 years ago, but if Domino's comes up on your screen, when it was a ridiculous price. I mean, it was like $5 a share at the depths of its turnaround story and the financial crisis and all these things were going on with it. And it comes up on your screen. So you add it to the portfolio, and now it's without looking, I think it's almost a $400 stock. So it's been like an incredible 10 years, or give or take. Yeah, 10 to 12 years for this company. How long would you hold it for? So obviously, let's say it comes up on the screen and you capture that initial bump that it gets like right out of the gates, and you go on a terrific run. But how long would your strategy allow you to hold this for? Like, does valuation come into play or something like that? Like, I know you said you update your rankings quarterly, but like as it gets more expensive, like how long would your, like, I mean, obviously you can't give an exact thing without doing a back test, but like how long can you hold things for?
Well, we can, for us, I mean, we're very thematically focused. And so, if you look at the holdings, for instance, of the brands fund, most of the holdings in there we've held for 3.5 years, and then we've also held them for a year earlier in the separate account. And so for us, as long as the thematic is still highly important and top of mind and front and center as far as really important parts of the consumer spending theme, then in theory we can hold things for, I mean, I'm happy to hold things for long term. I struggle to see a time when I would probably want to sell in my entire position of Amazon, for instance.
Sure.
You look at some of these multi-trillion-dollar market caps and you think, I mean, how much more juice is there to squeeze out of the fruit? But as long as a company keeps innovating and the financial metrics keep moving in the right direction, we don't care quarter to quarter. But if we saw that, if we were early enough in the Domino's theme, and we just kept seeing, listen, yes, the pizza delivery, the pizza market in general is highly fragmented, but these guys just keep expanding stores and revenue keeps growing, and they keep using technology to enhance things. there's absolutely no reason that we would want to sell that unless we just thought that something in the thesis had changed. And here's a fast
Sure.
fact. I was just refreshing my brand's brochure, and one of the slides I kind of show people, the 10-year track record of some key brands in really important spending industries. And I use Domino's in that kind of fast casual pizza delivery. Over the last 10 years, the S&Ps would have turned 10,000 bucks into 36,456. Domino's is up to 176, 671 with that same 10,000 bucks.
Incredible.
I mean,
Incredible.
a pizza store, right?
I
And
know.
and I don't even like. I mean, listen, when I was in high school, I loved it. I worked at Domino's. It was an awesome job for a high school kid. But I don't love Domino's pizza. I'm a bit of a food snob now, but I get their special sauce and the technology and their efficiencies. You know,
Yeah, like I mean, I already told you I have 4 kids, so I will defend Domino's Pizza to the death. It's the only place we can go and get food for that's like that's at least edible for about 20 bucks. So it is, as far as I'm concerned, it's amazing. And the convenience factor,
no
I
doubt.
mean, I know you know this, but like I mean, the convenience factor is just off the charts. I don't know
That
of
app is
any.
amazing.
I mean, that's really its brand, right? Its brand is convenient. I mean, we all know the pizza, right? Like, I mean, it's fine, but it's not it's not
It's not
it's
a
not
bougie pizza, but it's $10, right?
it's 10 bucks and it's fast and it's convenient as anything is that you can order. So it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's amazing.
They
So
keep getting it done. I
they
mean,
do, they do. So how do you categorize brands? So I mean, I see on your website, like you have 3 categories for brands. The first is a mega brand. What is a mega brand?
yeah, it's the portfolio is I always say it's one basket, but it's got 3 subcomponents. The mega brands to me are like the chassis of a vehicle, the foundation of the house. A mega brand is an already established company that is highly recognizable, still highly relevant, serves in most cases. There are a few like Home Depot and a few others that don't serve kind of a global audience. But if you have a brand that's very relevant, very recognizable, are serving a global opportunity. Hopefully, you appeal to kids all the way up to adults and older adults. So you have many people in demographic age cohorts to sell to. Super high brand love and loyalty. You've got that management and the culture of innovation and that vision. Like all of those things colliding can give you that $1 trillion market cap. There's if you break down, what is it, Apple and Microsoft and Google, um, who else, and Amazon on the $1 trillion above, they
Sure.
all have those things in common.
Sure.
And,
Yep.
and so when I look at who has the potential business model to reach the mega brand status and the $1 trillion club, those are, and I don't like Facebook at all. I don't currently own Facebook,
Right.
but I do see that Facebook has all of the right stuff to get it to be $1 trillion business. So I would consider Facebook a mega brand, even if it's not a business that I'd love. I don't love Snap. They reported a decent number, but I don't
Right.
I don't love the business model. But so yeah, so the mega brands are about 70 or 75% of the portfolio. And to us, those are kind of the more stable, predictable, high quality businesses, really strong cash flow. That's kind of the anchor to the portfolio. And then around that, we have some other more, sexy things like the innovator brands that we talked
Gotcha.
about.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But so like your mega brands, yeah. I mean, you mentioned like Home Depot, Apple, Alphabet, and I mean those are like some of the core positions in my own portfolio. I mean those are just classic companies with so many great things to say about them. But like you said, the second category you have for brands is an innovator brand. What is an innovator brand?
Those are, I'll get crazy and say those are some of the ARC names, right?
Okay.
Some
All
of the
right. All right.
super duper high growth, and a lot of your names. I think you guys have a
Sure.
lot of,
Yep.
high revenue
Absolutely.
growth, high valuation names that are just disrupting industries that are, if you take a look at Roku, for instance, the streaming video category started obviously Netflix, and frankly, Netflix was an innovator brand that's turned into a mega brand.
I was actually going to ask you, like, so yeah, like, do companies like Netflix, that was the example I was going to use, like, do they graduate? At what point do they graduate, I guess? When
They
did Netflix graduate?
Yeah, no, when they are kind of ignored by Disney and Viacom, and they have this business model, it'll never catch on. And if it really catches on, we're big enough to scale and jump
Right,
in.
right.
Right? I mean, listen, I love Disney. I respect it. I don't currently own Disney, but the they let Netflix create a business that should have been Disney's or somebody else's. Netflix was early. They took all the risk. Look at the return of Netflix. Netflix, that same $10,000, I'm looking at my sheet, is $153,000 versus the 36. So there are huge potential rewards for the early companies that see either a new business model that they can exploit, or just take an existing model that really needs to be changed and disrupted, and then go to market and just really shake things up. I mean, Airbnb is probably a good example in the hotel and the lodging
Absolutely. Yeah.
space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those tend to be, those tend to be much more volatile names. They tend to have much more upside. They tend to have a lot more volatility and potential downside. So they tend to be sized accordingly. The mega brands, Visa, MasterCard are my two biggest holdings at maybe 6 and 7%, whereas my innovator brands are Square and Airbnb and Afterpay and Peloton, that are super potential upside if they really get it right. But there's a lot of risk, because once you get on Amazon's radar and Apple's radar, then you really got to compete with people that have a big brand and have a massive moat and lots of free cash flow to throw at a problem if they choose to. So, but the rewards are great for if you get it right. And I would even say, a Square is probably still the innovator brand, even though it may have the market cap of a mega brand. But I would
Right.
say PayPal has graduated, in my
Right.
opinion. PayPal's graduated from an innovator to a mega brand.
And with market caps now, it's almost like you have to adjust, I think, to like expect, like, I mean, it still blows my mind, like, $1 trillion company, like, well, there's companies now, I mean, I don't even, without looking, but like Apple and Microsoft are right there, if not over. And and I think those companies are going higher. I mean, maybe not tomorrow, but like a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, those companies in my mind are undoubtedly going to be higher. And so it's almost, $100 billion company is not what it used to be, is all I'm saying, I guess.
No, and it's when I see these 1999 examples, I mean, we remember 99. Like, I was a young guy and I didn't know. I knew just enough to be dangerous back then,
Okay.
and I believed a lot of the hype. But these companies, Apple, Microsoft, the amount of cash on the balance sheet, the amount of cash they generate, the loyalty that they have with real businesses, that there is nothing compared to 1999 in those mega brands, mega cap stories. Yes, there's certainly
Absolutely.
the 30, 40, 50 times sales names that are part of some other part of tech. I get it. I see the similarities on that side. Even Amazon at 35 times sales finally peaked in 99, and
Right.
business kept right on growing, and the stock went down 90% or something. So
Yeah,
there is a limit to the valuation,
of course.
expansion that you can have. But I just don't see it in the mega brands
No,
category.
I'm with you. Like, I mean, it's like you said, there's pockets of frothiness, and some of which are debatable. Like, some of, I'm like, that's a bubble. I mean, but some pockets, like, I'm on the fence about. Like, there's some names that I'm like, well, that's an incredible company, and you can see what they're doing and how fast they're growing, and I don't know if it's overvalued or not, but I know I would pay a lot for it. But yeah, absolutely. There's pockets of frothiness, no doubt. But like, as far as like the overall market, like, I don't see how there's any way. I think you can really say it's just like 99 and make a blanket statement like that.
I mean, you look at Snap. I'll pick on Snap because I don't think. Let's face it. I don't think the development of Snapchat has been good for our kids. I'll be the
Sure.
old man parent right now. 3 billion in revenue and 86 billion market cap. That seems a little excessive to me. I,
Right.
I get that they're growing. They still can't make any money. So we certainly have had some of those kind of names because of the growth factors. But for us, it's really how relevant, how able are they to really generate really good revenue and really good free cash flow and all of the things that we know make a really solid business to give you a moat. I mean, when you're generating a mass amount of cash and you have great opportunity to reinvest that cash and compound that cash, that's how really good businesses compound over time. So those are, a lot of the brands that we focus on. Now, you know, if you think about brands, sometimes people initially think, Nestle, Procter and Gamble, Johnson and Johnson, and those are part of the equation too. We tend to use those kind of defensive brands more when we're nervous about the market and we want to have play some defense. So we tend to be kind of, when we're on offense, we love some of the brands that we've talked about. When we're a little cautious, we tend to hold more cash and add more defensives because
Sure.
they tend to hold up.
Sure.
It's hard to get excited about 30 times earnings and 5% organic revenue growth.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah, unless the doo-doo's hitting the fan and that's where money's rotating.
And so now the third and final category for your brands is our turnaround brands. And so like I'm interested in this brand because how often can brands turn around? Like how do you look for brands that can make a turnaround?
Well, the turnaround is also kind of opportunistic. So, I we trade a little bit inside the fund, and sometimes you could find a brand that's in the 200 that you don't necessarily love the thematic right now. You may not love their financial metrics right now, but the stock chart is saying, man, this company's breaking a downtrend. I think I can probably get 10 or 15% of this out of this company, and I'm okay renting it.
Right.
So there is definitely kind of an opportunistic tactical trading component to this in this basket. But from the turnaround perspective, here's a good example. In December, when we updated the 200, we added a couple of names that we had kicked out 3 years ago because they lost relevancy. And we added them back because they got destroyed like we kind of thought they were going to. And we started thinking there's actually a decent opportunity now to make some money in these companies because they're going from completely dreadful to being less dreadful. And what comes to mind is like an Under Armour or an L Brands or a Gap.
Gotcha.
My wife loves Lululemon, but
Yeah.
I noticed that her and my daughter were going to Athleta a lot more. And I started doing some work on Gap before we put it in, and I said, wow, Athleta and the growth in Athleta and probably Old Navy is probably worth more than the overall company. So the legacy Gap and the Banana Republic and all that stuff, that's a business that's just struggling, and they're going to keep closing stores because they haven't really changed or innovated. But part of the other side of the house is really intriguing, and the stocks are down 60+%.
Right.
Now there's an interesting turnaround story. I'd even put Tapestry in that. The stock just kept going down and down and down and down. And the Coach part of Tapestry was doing great, but the other part, Stuart Weitzman, and just was struggling. And so there are certain some of those companies where we start to see an inflection. And COVID has been a great example of that turnaround story this year, because last year a lot of these apparel businesses were closed, and some of them had terrible omni-channel and online presence, so their sales fell off a cliff. But a name like Capri, that's got Michael Kors and
Capri with an
Jimmy
interesting
Choo
one.
and Versace. They clearly got it, and they got their house in order and refinanced a ton of debt. They're really good at social. And I actually found that one through Sean Avery over at Avery.
That's the same thing. Yep. Same thing.
I just love listening to his stuff. So, it's another great example of how many people we've all been able to connect with on Twitter. It's a dang shame they haven't been able to figure out how to monetize better. I've been in and out of Twitter. I just can't, Twitter just hasn't gone mainstream yet. I think it's pretty mainstream in our industry, but
Yeah.
I'm rooting for them because I see the business model and their ability to allow people to connect way better than LinkedIn does.
Oh, and look, with you, with Sean Emery, with so many people I've connected with, we, we've almost grown our entire business out of Twitter,
Yeah.
and yet when we tried to advertise on Twitter, it didn't work. It just didn't work as good as like Facebook or Google or all these other avenues that are available now. And it is just you're right. It's like you see the potential there, and yet I don't know. They just can't do it for some reason.
Maybe Jack should focus.
Yeah.
He's doing okay with Square. I think he
He's
probably
doing
needs
more
to
than okay
do
with
it
Square.
better.
Yes, absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, so the turnaround stuff is it's turnaround, it's opportunistic, it's tactical trading. It's kind of, everything that might not fit in number one or number two, that if our job is just to make money and do it in a risk, in a kind of a risk managed way, sometimes you just see an opportunity to, I might even see Netflix as a good opportunity as a tactical trade after it got beat up on earnings at some point over the next couple of days. If I have some cash in the strategy and something like that goes down, I might take that as an opportunistic trade.
Sure, absolutely. Like about Capri. I remember Sean Emery's like his bull pitch on it when it was like, I don't know, maybe $30 or so. And maybe a little under 30. And when COVID hit, it dropped down to about $8. So I looked at it a lot harder. I was already looking at it, pre-COVID. And and I tweeted about it. I said, the valuation, I like it. And I bought it. I don't know, like $9 or something. And it went up 20%, 30%. And I sold it. So I bought it basically I bought it at 9, sold it at 12. And I thought I did great. Right now it's about $50. So,
Right. And
it's
most
just,
people would argue it's still a double from here.
yeah, it really could be. It really could be.
It could be.
My problem with these brands is like, if I don't have that long-term confidence to just hold, I just, my conviction gets shaken as soon as it goes down. And so, but I see the opportunity. It's been hard for me though, to do well in it, or to do well with these types of brands.
And apparel in general. I mean, let's face it. I'm going to be very kind of stereotypical here. Men
Okay.
and fashion. I have I wear the same pair of jeans. I wear
Sure.
like 5 different of the same T-shirt from Buck Mason. I would not say that I'm fashion forward. So in some ways, we all do our little channel checks, and you have to let the data kind of drive you in some way with some fashion trends, because we're clearly not leading those fashion trends.
Well, it goes back to like Peter Lynch's book, right? Like,
Right?
look where your wife and daughter are shopping, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk a little about the consumer sector right now. I mean, are we getting ready for a big economic rebound? You think the COVID economic hangover is going to last for a little bit yet? What do you, how do you think of the consumer sector at this point?
I mean, listen, I live in California, and our governor has done all he can to keep us from doing what we love to do.
Right.
Say we're going to open June 15th. Most of the country is already, fully opened, I think. Um, you know, I, it's a virus. So the vaccinations are not a silver bullet. You can still get COVID when you've gotten vaccinated. Your odds just go down. And if you get it, your chances of having a severe case are lessened. And so that really helps confidence. And we do a lot of macro work. And if you look at savings rates, for instance, they tend to average about 7.5%. And because of COVID, and when we were forced to kind of hole up in our houses, the savings rates jumped up to like almost 30%. Obviously, that's since mean reverted down, but we're still over 2 times the normal rate. So there's a little over $2 trillion now that is just kind of sitting there waiting for people who are pent up, have COVID fatigue at a massive rate, myself included, and we're getting vaccinated. Our economy is opening up. Our confidence is getting better. Where the hiring is going back. So in my opinion, we're out there ready to spend. And it's springtime. It's starting to be spring. That means summer vacations and kids out of school. And I happen to think that there is a massive amount of pent up spending that's going to be unleashed over the next couple of years. And I think the lodging and the some of the categories in the consumer services sector, I've written about that a few times. To me, that was the laggard. Out of COVID, the durable goods, people first started doing stuff for their homes and painting the house,
Sure.
and that's why
Right.
Sherwin-Williams has done well, and doing
Home
upgrading it.
Depot.
Home Depot and Lowe's really did well, and Whirlpool's doing well. And we're now kind of moving into the services sector where we're able to go out and we're going to go bars and restaurants, and we're going to go on vacation. And whether we do staycations locally and we just drive, or we finally get on a plane. I just think, I mean, I don't know about you. I am a music guy. I can't wait to go to a concert. And I
Oh,
know
there's
that's
so many
gonna
things right now. I think people are just, I mean,
because
yes, myself included, but like, you're right, you're chomping at the bit right now, right?
we
I mean,
can't wait.
chomping at the bit.
Right. And listen, it's going to be slow because politicians are just so slow to kind of allow us to get back. So, let's face it. I mean, we've even heard from the cruise lines that bookings are just really robust as people get vaccinated. So the demand is there. So yeah, I think if GDP is 70% consumer spending, and consumer spending has a lot of tailwinds for the next couple of years, I think we're in for some better times from the consumer spending perspective. Now, certainly that you know, we may take from some areas that we have been spending and kind of stop or lessen that spending and then shift our dollars somewhere else. But I do think on a net basis, the spending is going to be more because we just have more ways to spend and more options to spend. And that's naturally going to benefit the companies that are most relevant in all of these spending categories.
Sure. No, absolutely. No, that's let's hope that happens. And I kind of, I'm in this, I think I'm in the same boat. Like, I think the same thing. Like, people are just ready. They're ready to be out and about, and they're ready to do the things they used to do. They're ready to enjoy vacations again and to get, just get out and socialize. So I think I'm in the same boat. Like, I just don't, uh, y- yeah, I know this has been a lot harder economically for some people than others, but like, I think overall, like, people are going to get out, and I think that'll be a boon to the service sector. And I just think that it's really going to hopefully ignite the economy. I don't know exactly when, but I don't think it'll be too terribly much longer either.
No, and I don't even know that I buy the corporate travel is going to continue to be much less. All it takes is some second tier companies that want to start making some inroads into their client accounts or their prospect accounts while the bigger companies are still kind of doing Zoom meetings.
Exactly. There's going to be hungry salespeople who are ready to
100%.
travel, and they'll be the first ones there. And as soon as they land that big sale or that big client, that big account, that's just going to open the floodgates. I agree.
It is. It
Yep.
is. I mean, again, I think it's gonna start slow. And we've heard we own Southwest Airlines in the fund, and they had a great earnings report, and they are clearly seeing the signs of that. And the nice thing about our strategy and just the consumer in general, because we're consumers, we kind of know the playbook, right? We know how people act. We know what people like to do. We are social creatures by nature. Even if you're not a social person, I mean, I have some buddies that I would say are on the left side of the not so social. Even those guys are pent up and want to get out and talk and want to go out and
Right,
have a
right. No,
steak
well,
or beer.
I'm that way. I'm that way. But I want to get back to being antisocial because of my choice, right? Like instead of being forced to. So like, I'm that way, and I'm ready to
Yeah,
be out and about. Like, no doubt, no doubt. Let me ask you. I got a few more like
sure.
miscellaneous questions for you. So I have one that I was thinking about today as I was getting ready for this interview. How do you categorize companies with multiple brands? So I mean, you have Costco, which is its own brand, but you also have Kirkland. You have Walmart, which I think on their one of their last quarter's report, I think they said they had 13 brands beneath them, like consumer, private label brands that do over $1 billion in business every year. You have
Right.
Procter and Gamble, which is just like this whole, I mean, a family, Tide, a Gillette, Pampers. How do you judge companies when there's like you have all these multiple brands that work within them?
It's part of, number one, it's in the screener, it's in that brand relevancy screener. They actually get double weighted. So if you have a brand that does have, that's got what we call a house of brands, particularly if I mean, in theory, if it made its way into the 200 index, then it is one of the most relevant brands in its category, in the Git code and in the sector already. But yeah, if you're Constellation Brands and you have all of these liquor brands under your umbrella, you have the ability to have multiple 1 billion or more type of brands. Those are intriguing. Now, obviously, most of the time, even if you have 10 brands underneath you, you're all generally in the same category. So if you're if you're a consumer staple, or if Procter and Gamble's in the household, the household products category, they have multiple brands, but they're all still under the household products category. So if we were going to own something like that, we would want to have some exposure to that category. And most of the time that's going to be, we had some last year in COVID, in part because there was a shortage of that kind of stuff when people were, overbuying at Costco and the supermarkets. And so we knew that they were going to have strong earnings,
Right.
with it, like a Kimberly Clark and a Procter and Gamble and all
Right.
that,
Right.
or we just want to introduce more defensiveness into the portfolio. But absolutely, that's very intuitive. That I mean, look at Apple. My gosh, the watch,
Right.
the
Right.
iPad.
Exactly. That's a great.
I mean, now maybe with this new, what is this tracker? I didn't read the full.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Report.
It's like it's a tracker that you can put on different things, like your keys, or in a backpack, or in a laptop case, things like that. And they used, well, I hope I get this right, because it was just out, and I didn't read too much beyond the press release, but like it uses its network of phones, like using Bluetooth to like track these things down, so they don't have to be on like a Wi-Fi or
Right.
cell network or anything like that to track them.
Yeah. Well, thank heavens they're not Facebook, because then they would be just tracking you and sending you ads
Right.
everywhere already.
with with like little microphones everywhere or something.
Where?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that part of the mega brand and the potential to get to the $1 trillion market cap is, you may have hooked somebody with the iPhone, but you're not going to get to $1 trillion if you're a one-trick pony. Do you have the ability and the brand love to be able to introduce follow-on products that wow us? I mean, most of us, there's a reason Apple is the market cap it is. Look around your house, the amount of products that we have on. I have 2 Mac screens in front of me. I have, a couple of iPads. I have 2 iPhones. I have an Apple TV that's on its way out because Roku's replaced that. But I mean, I
I
have
know, and the funny thing is, we were talking about our kids, but like it's my kids who got us into Apple. Really,
absolutely.
like we had one Apple laptop in our house, and now there's Apple products everywhere, because like we're talking about our kids being ingrained early with brands, and that might be the strongest brand I've seen, like with my kids, to be honest. Like if I think about it, like, but that's, I mean, there's no doubt. Like, I mean, they are Apple kids.
And I always ask advisors too, go, when you go home tonight, have some fun with your kids. And I've done this as in a seminar where we're it's with an advisor. They bring, that we brought 15 households out. We actually did a Tesla test drive. We did it at a country club. We had a Tesla show car and a drive car, and the gals that came out and talked about the technology, and we all got a test drive in the Tesla. And then we went back and we had cocktails and hors d'oeuvres, and we talked about the brands that people love. And it is so unbelievably fun to watch people's eyes light up when they're talking about a brand that they love. And the Tesla, I went back, 6 months later to the advisors, and I just said, just out of curiosity, what percentage of those clients wanted to buy the stock and did, and then also who bought the car? And he said like 70% of them said, I need to buy the stock. That was their first inclination, which I loved, because most people don't necessarily connect the dot. They like
Right.
the product, so they buy the product, but then they forget, oh my gosh, I missed this massive run in a company that I was so in love with.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why I
Right.
created the fund. But he said that 30% of the people bought Teslas too, which he wasn't real happy because they took money out of their account to buy the
Sure.
Tesla.
Sure.
But in many ways, the gains from the Tesla, the girls from Tesla said a lot of people have literally come to us and said, "Hey, I'm buying a Tesla with the gains from Tesla stock." And they were just like, that was the most amazing thing to hear.
And yeah, that is amazing, and the gains have been about that good. So
A little over 1,000%.
that's that's
Or
incredible.
your $10,000 10 years ago is a little over $1 million. It's
That's insane.
$1.2 million.
Wow, incredible, incredible. Well, let me. Okay, so I have a question for you.
Yeah.
50 years from now, what do you think is the most durable brand that you're very confident will still be around in 50 years? If you had to just pick one.
If I had to pick one, I mean, it's hard to see Apple not being there. I mean, I can think of others. I mean, Apple's the one that first. Apple and Nike are the two that came to my mind quickest.
Okay. Okay.
Um, Amazon would be probably the third. But there, if it's something that is a part of our spending all the time, and it's in products that we can't live without, those are the places that I think are, have the most kind of durability. Because in theory, if the phone at some point gets replaced, in theory it should be by Apple.
Right.
Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I mean, I always used to
Right.
say that about Exxon and Chevron.
Right.
Long ago they should have been at the forefront of
Electric vehicle technology.
the clean energy world. It's
Absolutely.
like, okay,
Yep.
we're here and we're dominant, but we know that there's a life cycle for that, and we're going to slowly transition to this while we still need this, and at some point it's going to be a smooth transition. Maybe that's a little too naive, but I certainly think an Apple and a Nike in particular are two that come right up to my top of mind.
Great answers. So another one. I'm in South Florida, as we talked about, and in Fort Lauderdale, just north of Miami. It's one of my favorite metro areas in the country. One of the only other metro areas that rivals it in my mind is San Diego, where you're at. Make the bull pitch for San Diego. Why should people be in San Diego? Because I love that city.
Well, you never have to look at the weather ever. I mean, I joke, like, I don't ever even consider what the weather is going to be. I'm a big outdoors guy. I love the mountain bike. I can mountain bike all year round. I can wear shorts all year round. Yes, it gets cold. It gets down to 40 sometimes. But for a guy that's from the East Coast, who grew and lived in Colorado and lived in Tahoe, where it gets cold and you have winter, San Diego, from a lifestyle perspective, from an outdoors perspective, from a raising a family perspective, is a pretty wonderful place to be. It's California, so we have the sunshine tax, but at least
Right.
you're going to get something for the tax. I grew up in Jersey, and it's a pretty high tax state, and it's pretty, you got winter, and the attitude in some cases
Right.
on the East Coast is a little tough.
Right. No doubt. No doubt. The winters, yes. The winters and the people probably a little tougher in New Jersey. And then final question that I like to ask all the people I interview that have kids. You're a father. I mean, you brought it up several times in this conversation. We were talking about it before we were recording. One of the things I've talked about before is like how I grew up in a very blue collar background, two great parents, but like they did not know much about money, and they never really they passed on all that wisdom to me. It's how I want to teach my kids about investing and just like financial awareness. Like, it's something I very intentionally think through. When it comes to you and your daughter, like how are you trying to teach her about investing?
Yeah, it's a concept that we talk about all the time. I mean, the fact that she's my little analyst, I have, what, you go to school and it's like, hey, what does your dad do, or what does your mom do? And, we go in and we say, what do you love? I literally look around the room, and I'll say, okay, I see Vans. That's a company that if you had some money, and you wanted to invest in companies that you love in the hopes that the value of that money is going to grow, you would probably want to identify those companies that are very popular. And I use her all the time for that analysis. I always ask, Sky, what are the kids wearing? What's the cool stuff? What's the cool apparel? And in California, it's Vans with VF Corp. I wish Vans was a separate company because I don't want some of the other stuff that's part of VF Corp. But I, Starbucks. And so I ask her, I say, what are if you're going to go out and spend some of your money, because she likes to save her money and save up for things that she wants. She's saving for an iPhone. She's not going to get it for a few years. But she has gift, like during the holidays, she asks for gift cards because she loves to be able to go shop. And she says, Dad, I want to contribute to those companies by purchasing their products, because all of her retirement, not her retirement, her college fund is in the brands fund. So she owns Starbucks, and she owns Amazon, and she loves Whole Foods, and she gets that through Amazon, and she owns Costco, and she loves Target. Her favorite place in the whole wide world is Target.
Gotcha.
So we talk about how to make money, and then how to make your money grow. And part of that growth is understanding the companies that you love and you're beholden to, and that you would want to spend your time on, and that are very popular, because those tend to be pretty good places to put your money. So we have that. She loves to go to the RH gallery because they're such sexy galleries, and she sees this crazy cloud couch, and she doesn't think in price. I'm just
right,
like,
right, exactly. No, she just knows she wants a cloud couch. Yeah,
that's $9,000 couch. Of course you like it, right?
You better like it. Right.
You better like it. But my thematic certainly is a wonderful way to talk to kids about making money, making it grow, and being kind of being loyal to things. So it's a fun thing that we have in our family. And even when I started this thing 5 years ago, I sat my family in a room and we had this debate about what are the, it was one of those, put the whiteboard on the wall, and everybody's starting to fire at, all right, I'm going to say a category of spending. You tell me the brands that come to mind, front of mind. And we started doing that. And it was a very enlightening, kind of process that looked a lot like the end result of the Brands 200 index, frankly.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Eric, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm totally jazzed about getting this conversation out there. Where can listeners find you if they're interested in learning more?
Yeah, you can go to our website. It's globalbrandsmatter.com. Under the brands tab there's a couple of different sub tabs, but the dynamic brands is the portfolio that we run. And so you can follow it real time. And, as we make changes, we kind of change that. So that's one place. And my team is with an RIA, a registered investment advisor, that's up in the Bay Area in Utah, AccuVest. So ACCUVEST, AccuVest.com is our website. And then we have that Global Brands Matter, which is the dedicated brands website. And my contact information's on there. And you can connect with me on Twitter through @DynamicBrands is my handle. And, if you're in San Diego, always up for having a fried chicken sandwich at Shake Shack and a beer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if I'm in San Diego, I'm going to take you up on that.
100%.
Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Matthew Cochrane. We're Seven Investing, and we're here to empower you to invest in your future. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Matt.